Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for our networking events. This is one of our signature events for our conference. Let me put this down. There's some pictures being taken. Thank you. That's someone else's problem now. One of the more important relationships that entrepreneurs and small businesses do rely on is a banking relationship. It's important that we have good bankers. I'm sorry, Lee, is that not loud enough for you? Yeah.
There you go. You need to be louder.
We have had for the... See, Lee, see what you do? You ruin everything with your input. One of the more important banking relationships that the foundation has enjoyed is with Brian McCowan, Senior Loan Officer with Northeastern Bank. They recently built a branch. Yes, we should applaud that. We should applaud that. Recently built a branch down on Commerce Way, right?
That's right.
I sometimes look at it longingly while I'm shopping at Market Basket, wondering what Brian is doing, wearing. The fact remains, in order for small businesses to really get a leg and demonstrate the value of their product, we talked earlier today about gaining market value, not just through defense contracts. You need a banker to actually kind of sometimes validate some of what you see. After the first year's conference, Brian came to me and he said that they started expanding their lending portfolio to include aquaculture. That's movement, folks. That's action items, right? We're not going to ask him how many loans he's given, but they're open to it now, right? That's the point. Ladies and gentlemen, please bring your hands together for our sponsor tonight, Brian McCowan from Northeastern Bank. How you doing?
Whoa, yeah.
Too close, too close, too close.
Thank you everybody for coming. It's so great to be here to help and sponsor this conference. It's growing every year and it truly gets better with every year. Thank you for all of you for coming and enjoying the several different exhibits and everything that we have for this conference. And we're happy to be here and we couldn't have had a better night to have this. So thank you for coming. And now we have Keith Ellenbogen, who will be giving his presentation. Thanks.
Hi everyone, thank you. I'd like to first just thank the Plymouth Foundation, the bank, and to say how wonderful it is to be here. I'd like to just kick this off. What I would really like to highlight is how extraordinary our marine life is locally as we think of the ocean and we have conferences that talk about blue futures. And I'd like to highlight even more so what's here within the town of Plymouth and why I think it's so extraordinary. To start with a fish that I've fallen in love with called the river herring, and these are the alewife river herring. And in the Town Brook River right here, when you go in the water, you see how turbid it is. And so I like this because the challenge of photographing these fish is not only being with them, although the time of day that they come up, they're in big numbers. The real challenge is that they're in very turbid water and it's hard to always see them. And I find this to be one of the most remarkable things, that a fish can swim from the ocean up a river, through a river that's moving so fast that I can barely hang on to even stay with them. And then they go upstream into the more calm waters where they spawn, reproduce, and then go back into the ocean. And with that, this is a river coming to life where, I think, yeah, where it's so many fish here that you can see, you no longer hardly can see the river, but rather all of the fish swimming in. And I find that to be just a remarkable life event that we have right here locally in the Plymouth every year. And so at moments, you can sometimes see how majestic these fish are. They're no longer just silverfish, but you can see pinks and hues and different coloration in them, and I find them both aesthetically really gorgeous and physiologically so. And then for those of you that are photographers out here, sometimes you want to show the action that's really happening and slow down the water, but keep the movement of the animals so you feel like you're really in there. And so here you feel like you're really swimming in high-speed water, which is really what's actually occurring here. And of course, they have the friendly faces that look at you and stare and say, "What are you doing in the water?" And it's not just these river herring that do that. It's also the other extraordinary animal that you have migrating through your rivers, which is the American eel. And their life journey is equally as extraordinary. I won't go into it, but here are the little ones, and the town of Plymouth rescues them, brings them up over the dam into where they can go and live happily in calmer water. Other animals that I think are amazing are the plovers. Each year, and I've been fortunate to go around, and they've given me permission to go in and take pictures, and here they are with the little chiquitas, I guess. And when you see them, they're so small and so fast, you can hardly believe it. This is shot with a really long lens, and the guy's just sort of in motion, and I really love the portrait of these guys. But some of the other animals that are just off the shore that are amazing are humpback whales that we have, and many of you see them. This is the only time I've ever seen one that fully got out of the water in all the breaching I've ever seen. But most of the animals that I'm looking to photograph are underwater. We have blue sharks here, which are really spectacular and beautiful with their puppy dog eyes. We even have seals that come up and curious, and I know you see them on the beach, but in the water, I find them equally as curious. Of course, underwater, we have great white sharks, and this was not an encounter I was hoping to have, but needless to say, we were inches away from each other, equally as curious. We have mola mola here, which are amazing. People travel all over the world, the Galapagos, Azores, places to see them. This is the one day I saw a super pod of dolphins underwater and was in with about 40 or 50 of them. I've never been in the water here with so many all at once, and when the visibility was good enough to be able to see them. And then the other day, I was able to see a leatherback sea turtle. This is the first one I've ever seen about 4 miles off the coast of Chatham, eating a lion's mane jellyfish. It was quite happy there as I just swam up to him and took a couple of pictures, but anyway, they were remarkable. And of course, what would life be like without the American lobster? I feel like my favorite, what represents America, or the Northeast in Massachusetts. And I'd just like to say really thank you very much. I just hope this gives a little bit about the life that we have over here and the time that I've spent over the many years photographing this extraordinary life right here. Thank you very much.
When I met Keith 3 years ago, it was our first conference, right? Keith was a really instrumental part in introducing arts into Blue Economy. We launched this during STEM Week typically, or just before or just after STEM Week. But Keith, as an arts ambassador, really helped us evolve our program from STEM into STEAM, right? And it's with STEAM you can actually get things done. Keith is not only just an oceanographer. When I first met him, the things that he showed me, the things I saw on his website, in some ways it reminded me of Carl Sagan. Because when the satellites were being built, it was Carl Sagan who suggested we put cameras on these satellites. It wasn't going to yield any real useful data for scientists, but he knew that if you're really going to capture the imagination and the respect of the public, you need to have cameras. You need to show people what they're never going to see. I am way too buoyant to swim down more than 10 feet. Keith goes to a world that we're never going to see. Let's face it, we're never going to see the things that Keith has seen, but he's brought them to us. He's shown us what's out there. And because of that, and because of your involvement in our first year, Keith, we'd like to give you what we're calling the STEAM Award for Excellence in Representing Arts in Blue Economy to Keith Ellenbogen, 2024. Ladies and gentlemen, Keith Ellenbogen. Thank you very much. That's very heavy, right?
Don't hit anybody with it.
No, exactly.
I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much. This is wonderful. Wow, it is really heavy and totally gorgeous. What an honor that is to have this. I feel fortunate to be able to have met you and to be able to be part of this conference. I also just want to really thank the town of Plymouth and the Department of Environment. Working with David and his team has been extraordinary. It's allowed permission and access to photograph these and to bring it to you. So thank you very much. It's really an honor. And I should say, as an artist and a photographer, it's also, I think so much the arts integrates in with the technology that we've done, and it's a real honor to be able to be part of that community that brings everything together. Thank you again.
Get together, guys.
Dave said that's going to look great on his shelf, right, Dave? With all your other art.
Right behind the Zoom calls.
Well, we have one more special presentation for you tonight, just to enhance the arts conversation. Glenn probably already knows by now that next year he'll be receiving the STEAM Award. Glenn, where are you? I can't see you. There's a blinding light.
Oh, he's
Where are
right
you,
here.
Glenn?
Come on.
There you are, Glenn. Come on up. I want to introduce you. Glenn is our friend from Hui. And some of you have already heard this story because you participated in last year's conference, but I'm going to do a quick overview so it kind of puts in perspective what we're here to talk about tonight. So you've seen the logo of the conference, which is the serpentine tail, right? The sea serpent that Henry David Thoreau wrote about in 1857. We adopted that as the logo for the conference because, well, frankly, entrepreneurs solve problems, and what bigger problem is there than a sea serpent when you're looking at a coastal economy, right? And then I met Glenn. and I found out that this man is not only a brilliant researcher at WHOI. Yes, you are, Glenn. Don't be mod. Come on, Glenn. He's a brilliant researcher. But he also has a passion and a hobby in exploring maps and sea serpents on maps from ancient times through the age of exploration. So we have a very special guest tonight. Glenn, say your last name for us.
Gaworkowicz.
Gaworkowicz. That's right. Gaworkowicz. That's what I said the first time. Glenn is going to present to you tonight about why sea serpents appear on maps from ancient times through the age of exploration. Let's hear it for Glenn.
Well, thank you so much, Stephen. And, thanks also for the little description of your mascot there, which I'm very impressed by. It's my first sea monster water bottle, so I will proudly carry that back to Woodstock. There. So I'll be talking about sea monsters mostly, but I will just say one or two words at the beginning about the kind of stuff I do that relate to the other part of the meeting as well there. Next slide. I mostly work on processes at the edge of the continental shelf. And I'm also part of an informal group called the Squid Squad. And we meet every Friday morning to talk about fishing conditions with squid. And I'm happy to say a member of the team is here, Katie Almeida. They're from Town Dock. And it's been extraordinary for me to have to follow the ocean conditions every week and talk about the fishing conditions. My other interest that I developed late in life was exploring antique maps. And I was always drawn to the sea monsters on the maps there, and so I just sort of carried that a little bit further. Next slide. This is a map right here of the North Atlantic from 1572. This is from Abraham Ortelius, and it was the first global atlas. It was called Theater of the World there. And there's a sea monster up here, right by those 4 islands that ring the North Pole. And there is a merman down here playing the lute. And it turns out that the lute players were the crazy rock and rollers of the 1500s there. So it's inappropriate he played that music. One other thing about that map. There's no less than 6 imaginary islands on that map, including the Isle of the Blessed, which was St. Brendan's Isle, there in Friesland, there, which was near Iceland. Next slide. I am a coastal oceanographer during the day when I'm not researching maps. And one of the things in terms of technology, actually, that I've worked on is an ocean observatory with the National Science Foundation called the Pioneer Array. So if anybody wants to talk to me about that afterwards, I'll be happy to talk about that. It's moved from southern New England to just north of Cape Hatteras there, so it's still going on. Next slide. And there's a cartoon of it. It has gliders that are vehicles with buoyancy engine, and also propeller-driven autonomous underwater vehicles, and then typical moorings there. Next slide. And then I have to say, one of the wonderful things about the latter part of my career is working so closely with the commercial fishing industry. And I've been working with Frank Barr, who's also here, with the Commercial Fisheries Research Foundation of Rhode Island, collecting temperature and salinity profiles. And we have collected over 900 profiles. Frank has processed all of them and put them on an easily accessible website there. And the most important thing about that interaction is twice a year I go to the Commercial Fisheries Center in Rhode Island, and it's just remarkable the discussions we have. They usually go for 2 hours, and it's just amazing how much I've learned about fishing, and I hope people have learned something about the ocean processes. And now on to the maps. So just a quick outline. Why are sea monsters important? And how did I get interested in them? I have just 1 or 2 quick slides about well-known Greek and Roman depictions. Anglo-Saxon sea monsters are less well-known, and they are crazy. And then most of the talk is about the age of exploration and what I call the Sistine Chapel of sea monster maps, the Carta Marina 1539. And of course, the relevance is that sea monsters are still with us, because who can forget the famous 2000 WPRI TV story about the sea monster in Portsmouth, Rhode Island. There. Okay, the next slide. So I advise MIT Woods Hole graduate students there. So if you're dealing with MIT students, of course, you have to start with theory. And I never knew that there was a monster theory, but there actually is. And at my sister's birthday party last summer, my niece came running up to me and said, Uncle Glenn, I hear you're talking about sea monsters in New Bedford. Have you heard of the book Monster Theory? So she gave it to me. She said, just read the first 2 essays, the rest of it is crap. So these are the important postulates on monsters. The monster's body is a cultural body. That which reveals or that which warns incorporates fear, desire, anxiety, and fantasy. The monster always escapes. The monster is a harbinger of category crisis. The monster dwells at the gates of difference. The monster polices the border of the possible. Fear of the monster is really a kind of desire. And the last one, which you can tell is really important because there's 3 periods here. The monster stands at the threshold of becoming. They ask us why we have created them. Next. A quote about sea monsters that I really, really love is from a book of essays about the ocean called The Eloquence of the Sardine by Bill Francois. And I'll just read this out very quickly. But who worries about the extinction of creatures that don't exist? They too are critically endangered. What has become of the sea serpents who, according to the sailors of bygone eras, were once so plentiful that they caused shipwrecks? Who among us in the last 2 centuries has heard the siren song? Where are the mermen, the kraken? Though these animals may never have existed, are they too on the verge of extinction? I wish I could have seen the prehistoric seas because they were inhabited by not only vast numbers of fish, but also by stories. Okay, so one of the most common sea monsters from ancient times is the hippocamp, and that has the forebody of a horse and the tail of a fish there. And that has actually appeared in a lot of different ancient cultures, Etruscan, Phoenician, Pictish, Roman, and Greek mythology there. And here's a few examples on vases in a mosaic. Next slide. And then, of course, from the Odyssey, there's Scylla and Charybdis there. And Scylla was a monster that had different dog heads around her waist there and a fish's tail, and she would try and sink the ships that would go through the Straits of Messina there. Next one. And then as I was getting my sea monster talk together for New Bedford about a year ago, I came across a real Greek sea monster. And I thought this was just a truly incredible story. During the 6th century, like 550 around there was actually a whale that terrorized ships in the Bosporus there off of Turkey. And for 50 years, it was sinking ships right on up to warships there. It was actually mentioned by Procopius, a Byzantine historian, and the emperor actually sent his best general, Belisarius, to try and kill this whale. He wasn't successful. Eventually the whale beached, and people from the nearby village came out and killed it there. They were not happy about all the victims it had taken. It's interesting that there's not enough details to know what it was, but it was probably either an orca or a sperm whale that had gotten completely separated from any other animals and was sort of crazy. Okay, Anglo-Saxon sea monsters. I was really surprised when I came across this book, Basilisks and Beowulf, which is about Anglo-Saxon monsters there. And There was a chapter on sea monsters. Most of it is on regular land monsters, which I don't find as interesting. But it was interesting that in Beowulf, the hero, before encountering Grendel, the monster there, actually had already killed 9 sea monsters. But I guess those were not significant enough to have another epic poem. And the thing that's interesting about the Anglo-Saxon sea monsters is that the ocean was a very, very, very dangerous place. And you think about the Viking raiders there. And so there was a lot of fear. The Viking raids, of course, began in 793 AD with the raid on Lindisfarne. But what's interesting was during Anglo-Saxon and medieval times, whales were regarded as emissaries of the devil for some reason, that's certainly changed now. Okay, and then this is the map that I call the Sistine Chapel of sea monster maps here. And this is from 1539. It was by a Swedish diplomat, actually, named Olaus Magnus there. And this is a giant map. I think it's something like 5 feet by 6 feet. It took him 12 years to make this map. And as anyone who has looked through an undergraduate oceanography textbook can attest, there are all sorts of monsters from this map that always appear in oceanography textbooks there. There's only 2 copies of this map that have survived. One of them is in Sweden, and one of them is in Munich. And what's interesting is it also depicted things like seasonal sea ice, eddies in the Norwegian coastal current, and a number of other phenomena. Ambergris actually appears on the map. Next slide. Okay, so here are some of the monsters on the map. The sea pig. So this goes all the way back to Aristotle and Pliny the Elder there. And Aristotle thought that every land animal had a corresponding sea animal. So that's why there's a sea pig. And they were believed to swim in large groups. And several hundred years later, a Danish naturalist thought they were porpoises there. Next slide. They get wilder. This is a sea owl right here. It's eating a rodent, which I'm not sure how that got out to the middle of the ocean. It's kind of left unexplained on the map there. But it has a beak here. And I think it's particularly odd because it's also being attacked by a sea rhinoceros there. Next one. And then this is really my favorite sea monster, the sea serpent or the sea orm. And it says on the map, actually, that they're over 200 feet long and 20 feet thick. And it specifically identified them as living in sea caves near Bergen, Norway, which I thought was kind of interesting there. And the red color is significant. I'll get to that in a minute there. And it's interesting that sea serpent attacks were recorded in ancient texts as far back as the First Punic War between Rome and Carthage, where there's an account of Roman soldiers being killed by a sea serpent in North Africa. So people now think that sea serpents were probably inspired by oarfish, which is a deep water fish that only rarely comes to the surface there. And they have the red crest, hence the importance of the red on the sea serpents there. They're also believed in Japanese folk mythology that when you see them at the surface, that means that a tsunami is coming there. So they may be able to detect pressure or something down deep. And an unusual class of sea monster interactions is sea monsters as dinner tables here. They could be whales. But this is a print here of St. Brendan actually celebrating Mass on the back of a sea monster there. I don't think he did that too many times. And then here's another one right here. They're actually cooking on top of it there. So this is my one practical tip here, which is defense against sea monsters. So in one portion of the map, you can see this ship has two fearsome sea monsters nearby. So the first thing you do is throw your empty casks or barrels at the monsters. And then you find the person who's the worst musician in the whole crew, and you have them play the trumpet as loud as possible, and the sound frightens them away. It is believed. So last summer, I was giving some little 5-minute introductions to the students at an informal seminar I was doing, and we switched topics to imaginary islands there. And the most unusual sea monster of all came up as I came across the Isle of Demons, actually. And there was an island called Antilia, which had 7 cities of gold. And that legend started after the Muslim conquest of Iberia there in around 730, something like that. And I was actually researching Antilia there, and then I noticed the island just north of it was the Isle of Demons, which I had never heard of before. The hand of Satan actually lived near the Isle of Demons, which was a giant hand that came out of the water and sank ships. I take it as a metaphor for Spanish seamanship, but I may be going too far. Next one. Okay, and then finally, just to wrap up here, of course, we still have to worry about sea monsters. And there is a classic video on YouTube from a news story from August of 2007 on WPRI TV, Providence, Rhode Island. And it occurred up here in Portsmouth, and if you just search on Mother, Mother Ocean, you can see it. I can't even describe the video because it set local news broadcasting back by about 200 years, I think. And this is this actually, I want to attribute things properly. I know intellectual property is important here. This is actually from the Paranormal Rhode Island website, so you can also see the Mercy Brown vampire, Salty Brine Beach, Unexplained Blast, and I'll close with the Gloucester Ghoul. So. Any questions?
Anybody questions?
Yes?
So the oarfish is called an oarfish, but the sea monster version was the ormfish. Did that
Orm,
its
yeah.
name?
I think orm is comes from the Norwegian there, and that's what they called them. It's interesting that you mentioned that because we were in a meeting with one of the students, and we started up the meeting, and one of the students said, Glenn, I learned all about the sea serpents. Look, here's a paper on artificial intelligence. Here's the sea orm right here in this figure.
Anyone else? Questions?
Well, thank you very much.
Because I have a Google News alert.
Sorry, guys, I had to refill my glass. That's not my fault. That's your fault. It's been a very long day, but I hope you'll agree with me. It was a very rewarding day. Yes? Did you learn a lot? Were you entertained? Were you not entertained? I hope to see you all in the morning. We start serving breakfast at 8:30. It's a hot breakfast. We'll be done by about 1:30. So it's a half a day tomorrow, but it's another rewarding day. We're gonna start with hearing from our local food entrepreneur, Tim O'Neill. If you don't know what to do with kelp, Tim knows, and he's gonna tell you. And then we're going to end on the day with former State Representative Josh Cutler, who is current Undersecretary of Workforce Development. Trust me when I tell you, if we don't have any trust, please open your hearts and listen to me when I tell you that our biggest problem, our biggest impediment to growth in Plymouth area, it's actually our workforce, and it's actually tied to housing. So Josh is going to talk a lot about that tomorrow, okay? I will see you all bright and early in the morning. Thank you all for coming.